Good morning. I am DR.K.ANAND KUMAR, lecturer in economics, V.V. Giri Government Degree College, Dampagadapa. Today I am going to tell about capital intensive technology versus labor intensive technology. Let us see the objectives of this topic. The first one, to learn about capital intensive technology and labor intensive technology. Second one, to compare the benefits and losses of both methods. Third one, to analyze the difference between these two methods. Introduction. Capital intensive and labor intensive refers to types of production methods used in the production of goods and services. Whether an industry or firm is capital or labor intensive depends on the ratio of capital versus labor required in the production of goods and services. While capital intensive is more expensive and requires a higher capital and investment, labor intensive production requires more labor input and requires higher investment in training and education of employees. Capital intensive technology. Professor Harvey Liebenstein, Paul Baran, Rasto, Hirschman, Maurice Dow, and Mahalanobis are the chief advocates of capital intensive technique. They consider that this technique is indispensable for accelerating the process of growth. Professor Paul Baran has the strong opinion about the necessity of using the capital intensive in less developed countries. To quote Professor Mint, the capital intensive or labor intensive methods of producing a particular commodity are classified by the modern factory methods of producing consumer goods and mechanized methods of constructing roads, irrigation works, and other projects. Here, because of lower labor costs and higher productivity, the net output per unit of capital may be comparatively higher. Capital intensive technique has been shown in a diagram. Now let us see the diagram for capital intensive technology. In this diagram, isoquad Q represents the initial level of output using OL amount of labor and OC amount of capital. With the introduction of new technique, a higher level of output is shown by labor, that is OL, but with greater dose of capital OC1. Therefore, capital intensive technique is using more capital with the same amount of labor. Let us see about labor intensive technology. In simple words, labor intensive technique is that which uses a comparatively larger amount of labor and small doses of capital. It is the technique by which more of labor and less of capital is required for the process of production. However, it can be defined as one in which a large amount of labor is combined with a smaller amount of capital. According to Professor Mint, labor-intensive methods of production are those that require a large quantity of labor with a given unit of capital. With this method of production, it is possible to raise output by using the same amount of capital but greater amount of labor. This technique fulfills two objectives of capital formation and skill. It raises agriculture production through the use of minor irrigation, better seeds, manure, implements, and the introduction of short duration crops. Labor intensive technique has been illustrated with the help of a diagram. In this diagram, isoquad Q shows the initial level of output which is being produced by using OL labor and OC amount of capital. With the adoption of new technology, a higher level of output is represented by the isocont Q1 can be produced by the same amount of capital, that is OC. In this case, greater amount of labor is OL. This shows that the technique is labor intensive technique. Choice of technique. There is a greater controversy on the question of choosing between labor intensive and capital intensive technique in less developed countries. All concerns differ to each other. Some are in favor of labor intensive technique, others advocate for the capital intensive technique. Before formulating any decisive opinion on the important question, let us study the arguments for and against each of these techniques. Arguments for capital intensive technology. Economic growth is accelerated. When we adapt capital intensive technology, economic growth may be accelerated. Then the second one is more employment opportunities. When we adapt the capital intensive technology, the more number of employment opportunities may be generated. The third one is capital formation. When we adopt capital intensive technology, the capital formation may be increased. The much amount of capital may be required for adopting the capital intensive technology. This capital intensive method may be more profitable. Then the other one is rise in living standards. Living standards may be raised through when we adopt these capital intensive technology. Far reaching effect. These effects may be very increasing. Then the other one is efficiency enhancing. The efficiency may be enhanced through this capital intensive technology. Economic and social overheads also is the positive argument for capital intensive technology. Now let us see the drawbacks or benefits and drawbacks of capital intensive technology. Benefits. Greater opportunities for economies of scale. When we adopt this capital intensive technology, there will be greater opportunities for economies of scale, for increasing the economies of scale. Then the other one is potential for significantly better productivity. Then the third one is better quality and speed. Then the last benefit, lower labor costs. Here, lower labor costs may be very less because we use the capital intensive technology. Then the drawbacks, significant investment may be required for adopting this capital intensive technique. Potential for lost competitiveness due to obsolescence. Then the other one is it may generate resistance to change from labor force. Then let us see the arguments for labor intensive technology. The first argument, when we adopt these labor intensive technology, the number of employment opportunities can be increased. More number of employment opportunities can be generated through this labor intensive technology. Then the second one is income spread more widely. Because of this labor intensive technology, the individual income can be spread more widely. Then the third one is resources arguments. Resources may be increased when we adopt this labor intensive technology. Here another one is saving in foreign exchange. Foreign exchange amount may be saved because when we use labor intensive technology, there is no need to import the other foreign goods and foreign investment. That's why we can acquire more savings in foreign exchange. Then the other one is prevent the danger of inflation. Inflation may be decreased when we adopt this labor intensive technology. Then the decentralization. When we adopt this labor intensive technology, there will be decentralization in the development or economic growth. The interior places may be improved. There are number of labor small scale industries or cottage industries may be started because of this labor intensive technology. Then the other argument is concentration of economic power avoided. Because of this labor intensive technology, the investors may be decreased, large scale investors may be decreased, and the small scale industries and small scale investment may be encouraged. That's why the concentration of economic power may be avoided through this labor intensive technology. Now let us see the benefits and drawbacks of labor intensive technique. Benefits. Unit cost may still be low in low wage locations. Then the other one is labor is flexible resource through multi-skilling and training. Then the third benefit is labor at the heart of production process can help continuous improvement. Drawbacks. Greater risks of problems with the employee or employer relationship. Potentially high costs of labor turnover. Need for investment in training. Let us see the difference between these two methods, capital intensive and labor intensive technologies. Labor intensive technology. In labor intensive technology, production relies on using labor resources, whereas in capital intensive technology, production relies on using capital resources. Now let us see the examples for industries relating to labor intensive technology. The first industry is food processing, then hotels and restaurants, fruit farming, hairdressing, coal mining. These are all the examples for labor intensive technology industries. Then the capital intensive technology industries, oil extraction and refining, then the car manufacturing, web hosting, intensive arable farming, transport infrastructure. These are all the examples for capital intensive technological industries. Then the other difference is labor costs are higher than capital costs in labor intensive technology. Capital costs are higher than labor costs in capital intensive technology. Then in this labor intensive technology, the costs are mainly variable, whereas in capital intensive technology, capital costs are mainly fixed. Then the other difference, firms benefit from access to sources of low cost labor. In capital intensive technology, firms benefit from access to low cost long term financing, whereas in labor intensive technology, no investment or less investment in machinery. Whereas in capital intensive technology, there will be a standardized quality may be applied. Where in labor intensive technology, process in which people do most of the production work. Whereas in capital intensive technology, machines do most of the production work. In labor intensive technology, labor will be do most production work, most of the production work. People will do the most of the production work. In capital intensive technology, machines will do the most of the production work. In labor intensive technology, higher operating cost may be occurred. In capital intensive technology, low operating cost may be occurred. In labor intensive technology, low investment cost is there. In capital intensive technology, high cost may be there. In labor intensive technology, it refers to production that requires a higher labor input to vary out production activities in comparison to the amount of capital required. In capital intensive production requires more equipment and machinery to produce goods, therefore require a larger financial investment. Now let us see the conclusion. It is difficult to decide to which technique should be adopted in an underdeveloped country. The use of labor intensive techniques tends to increase production and employment in the economy. On the other hand, the adoption of capital intensive techniques tends to accelerate the rate of capital formation and then to maximize productive capacity and employment in the long run. But in making a choice between labor and capital intensive techniques in the context of an underdeveloped country, it is necessary to consider a variety of factors, keeping in view the larger interest of the masses. Labor intensive techniques should be used in the consumer goods sector for a continuing and compounding effect on the rate of growth in income. Capital intensive technique should be confined to the capital goods sector. Thank you very much.